When I found Jessica, she was lying in a pool of blood in the rain. For 3 years. She couldn't remember anything. For 3 years, I looked after her. She often frowned and furrowed her forehead during those years. Say that I couldn't do anything. Right. She told the press that she didn't know who I was when she got her memory back and was back to her. Best. Later on at the wedding, I put the ring on the finger of the girl next to me. She stormed in with 900 bodyguards. They broke down the door and put a gun to my fiancé's head, saying, "Are you really going to marry her?" I got in front of my fiancé and said, "She doesn't love you." Chapter 1. The day Jessica got her memories back. The old doorbell in my house rang so much that it almost broke. Outside, there was a gathering of people wearing black suits and dazzling leather shoes, and the air was rich with the perfume of costly cologne. The man at the front bent politely and gave over a gold embossed business card that said President. "The automobile is waiting for you below." Jessica, or rather the woman who had been staying in the guest me bedroom for the past 3 years. The woman I called Jessie was now standing before the bathroom mirror, applying lipstick. When she heard the noise, her fingers did not pause. Following the final stroke of her lips were delightfully scarlet, and she gently turned around. She was still clad in the cotton nightgown I had negotiated for at a street booth yesterday. She was wearing 5U1 plastic slippers. However, her eyes had already altered. It looked like the surface of a frozen lake. A pointed knife shone coldly underneath. She glanced her sight across my uncomfortable palms and anxiously twisted the edge of my apron. Her glance moved across the box of instant noodles stacked in the corner, eventually landing on my face. "This is the fee for the last 3 years," she remarked in a colder tone than I had ever heard. "I'll have my assistant transfer it to you." My throat tightened as I grasped the cook tag in my fingers. The fragrance of oil clung to my fingers, making my eyes sting. "Jessie," I automatically screamed out the familiar name. Her eyebrows were somewhat creased. It felt as if she had been touched by something nasty. "This is Jessica," she corrected me. Her tone was UNA or GUABLE. Or President Jessica. She accepted the cashmere coat the aide handed her and threw it over her shoulders. The premium cloth immediately crushed the form of the affordable nightgown. I identified the coat. It was the store's most prized. I spotted possession in a mall window last week, and the price tag had so many zeros that I lost count. She walked towards the entrance. The crowd moved to make place for her. As she passed, her footsteps froze for a while. I figured she may turn around, even only to say goodbye. "The coffee machine manual is in the 3rd drawer," she stated. Her eyes were fixed ahead, her voice careless. "Next time, don't put the filter in the wrong way." The sound of her high heels impacting on the cement floor was crisp and hollow, each step shattering the final bit of warmth in my modest living area. The door gently closed behind her. The sound of the engine lessened as she disappeared. The world suddenly got silent, leaving only the sizzling sound of the burnt egg in the pan and my own heart thumping like a drum. 3 years went like a crazy dream. 3 years ago on that wet night, I discovered her by the junk trash underneath the company building. Her beautiful dress was covered with blood and filth, and her designer pocketbook was tossed a few paces away. Her shattered phone was soaking in a puddle. I took her back to this 50 square meter rental unit and haphazardly treated her wounds, cooked white porridge, and kept an eye on her high fever. The doctor indicated that her brain had been injured and she might lose her memories permanently. When she awoke, her eyes were as puzzled as a wandering child's. She complained that my oatmeal was too thick and the towel I purchased shed hair. She constantly frowned while watching Angelo watches me fumble with kitchen appliances and gives me the scowl reserved for a failed effort. "You can't even use a coffee machine." I got used to it. I grew used to her fussy personality, and the occasional spontaneity grew accustomed to my own carelessness in front of her, as well as my longing for her past luxury living. I anticipated life to continue like this, bumbling along like the sharp-edged stones that would gradually wear down to a soft fit, until now. The dream ended. The stone remains a stone save for one, which was always intended for Mount Everest. My phone vibrated and the screen lit up. A bank transaction alert. The zeros after the money was adequate to acquire this old rotting apartment block. The note was cold and impersonal, merely saying service fee. I stared at the line of digits, my fingers feeling chilly. The brightness outside was ideal. Glare in my eyes. Chapter 2. So you really accepted that money? Monica drank her lemon tea. Her small eyes examined my face, fascinated. On the bench in the community park, I held a can of beer. My grasp left a slight scratch in the aluminum container. What else could I do? I pulled on the corner of my mouth. Donate it to the Hope Project. I took care of her for 3 years. That money was rightly mine. Aunt Monica had been my mother's prior to her death. She was a card-playing buddy. She had lived half of her life in this old community. Matchmaker and gossip monger, Jessica's sudden departure had already become the most talked about issue among her neighbors. Foolish lad, Monica slapped my forehead with scorn. That was Jessica. Even a grain of dirt from enough for you to live on for 3 generations. Look at you 3 years. You've wasted all that time. Not even a sound of gratitude. And now you're empty-handed. Well, not empty-handed. At least you've got some money. She stared at my worn jeans and canvas sneakers with a strange face. But the spirit TSK. It's like a frost-bitten eggplant. Monica, let's discuss business. Regarding the item I instructed you to accomplish. Last time, I took a mouthful of beer with the icy liquid dribbling down my throat without causing any ripples. Oh, right. Monica slapped her thigh. She was suddenly full of enthusiasm and lowered her voice with mystery. Don't worry. And as it covered. This time you'll be satisfied. She's good-looking, steady in attitude, and at a glance she knows how to live a stable existence. She dragged out her words. The most vital thing is she's not after your money. She values character. I managed a smile. After everything with Jessica. I lack faith in my so-called character. Where is she? I questioned. She is coming. Monica screamed, pointing to the park entrance. The final rays of the setting sun highlighted the figure walks towards us in warm golden light. She wore a modest off-white cotton linen outfit with her long hair loosely tied up, exposes a gorgeous neck. In her palm, she carried an eco-friendly bag with green vegetable leaves peeking out. She did not walk swiftly. Her stride was tranquil and methodical, like an early summer wind quietly moving across the packed streets. As she approached and I viewed her face properly, I recognized she wasn't the same passionately exquisite beauty as Jessica. Instead, she had a clear cerebral, moderate charm. Her eyebrows and eyes were delicate, her nasal bridge was straight, and her lips were a natural pale pink. When she spotted me, she appeared shy. She lowered her eyelashes slightly, showing a barely visible blush on her cheeks. This is Vicky, Monica kindly greeted her. She just moved into our community and works at the library. This is Angelo. I've watched him grow up. He's an honest kid, a programmer, and has a stable job. Hello, Mr. Angelo. Vicky's voice was light as a feather brushing against the heart, with a lovely southern accent. Why you hello? I stood up uncomfortably, nearly spilling my beer can. She had a gentle, comforting aroma evocative of cotton drenched in sunshine, pure and peaceful. Monica stood aside. Vicky and I were left alone on the bench. The air was filled with a lovely stillness. Our shadows got longer as the sun sank, Monica told me. Vicky said first, her voice calming, you took care of a sick family member for a long time. She didn't mention Jessica's name, and her look was filled with compassionate understanding rather than probing eagerness. I pondered for a bit before answering, yeah, 3 years. She got better and then left. That must have been really hard. She glanced at the children chasing a football in the distance, her tone firm as if reporting a fact. Taking care of someone, especially someone who is unwell, involves both mental and physical power. To stay with it for 3 years is extremely impressive. It felt as if something lovely had stroked over my heart over the past 3 years. I've heard several individuals say it's worth it, that's Jessica, or you've hit the jackpot. But no one had ever said, that must have been difficult. The evening breeze blew past, carrying her beautiful fragrance. My tense shoulders loosened slightly in that instant. Chapter 3. Vicky lives in the 3rd floor in the unit next to mine. She was like a serene breeze that quietly melded into my chaotic life. The kitchen, which Jessica had earlier described as completely inefficient, began to show signs of life. When I worked late into the night, ravenous and staring blankly at the empty fridge, Vicky would just happen to bring over a hot bowl of spring noodles. The crisp white noodles were topped with a golden soft-boiled egg, green onion strewn on top, and the smell would rapidly flood my senses. Try it, she would always place the dish towards me with a beautiful gaze. I saw your light on and thought you might be hungry. At first he felt ashamed attempting to pay her. Vicky smiled softly, the corners of her eyes curving wonderfully. We're neighbors. It's simply a bowl of noodles, and it's lonely eating alone. With someone else it tastes better, like we're all battling for a taste. As she spoke, the light would fall on her gorgeous eyelashes, creating a small fan-shaped shadow over her face. She looked to know how to do everything. My laptop is 5 years old, which had been slow and crashing regularly, now operated flawlessly under her careful touch. The books on my bookshelf, which were disorganized and dusty, were precisely organized. She divided them into neat categories. Once, my 2-year-old coffee machine had never had its filter replaced and had been Jessica derided it as only capable of producing wastewater. But Vicky completely disassembled and cleaned it. When the nutty aroma of coffee resumed flowing from the machine, she had a little froth from the cleaning agent on her nose. She raised her head to look at me, her eyes gleaming. Look, it can still last a few more years. That smile was like a spring stream melting after a long winter, clean and warm. There was no indication of disrespect. There was no sign of how can you not even do this. On weekends, she recommended we go food shopping together. I pulled the cart awkwardly behind her, observing as she deftly negotiated between the aisles, her fingertips stroked against the fruits and veggies, her countenance attentive as she selected the products. She picked up a package of discounted blueberries and placed it in the cart, remarking softly, "Blueberries are at their peak this season. They're wonderful for making jam or combining with yogurt." She then picked up a pack of ribs. "They're on sale today. Want to create some soup?" At the checkout, I raced to scan and pay. Vicky did not complain. As I grabbed the big shopping bags, she instinctively extended her hand and accepted 2 of them. Her fingertips lightly caressed across the back of my hand. "Cool, with a tiny roughness from calluses. I'll help carry some. It looks pretty heavy." Her tone was careless. The falling sun cast a small shadow on the earth. At that moment, the noise from the busy supermarket beeping of the checkout register begins to drift away. All that remained was the rustling sound of the plastic bags, and her persistence exhaled quietly as she walked behind me. A long-lost, nearly reassuring sense of steadiness gently spread from the spot where her fingertips brushed against my hand. She took out her keys and opened the door to my flat, then paused and walked back to me. "By the way, Angelo," I was organizing the bookshelf. He saw a few old programming books. "Do you want me to get rid of them?" I froze for a minute before recognizing they were books I had eagerly bought shortly after graduation, only for Jessica to discard them as outdated and useless. So I stored them on a shelf. I felt a little odd saying, things are no longer useful." Vicky nodded and asked no other questions. She opened the door, and warm yellow light flowed out through the gap. "See you tomorrow." She grinned as she disappeared behind the door. I stand in front of my door. The dim light from the sensor in the hallway gives a pleasant glow. The smell of her cooking seeped through the gap in the door next door, carrying the aroma of home. The indentations from the shopping bags remained faintly burned in my palms. I looked down at the place on the back of my palm where the cool touch had stayed, and for the first time, I absolutely felt like I was taken care of was a subtle but significant force. It was not like the storm that emerged after Jessica gone, but more like the spring noodles Vicky had made for me, quietly slipping into the dry nooks and delivering a warm sensation of stability. Chapter for deciding to marry felt like a natural, obvious thing. There were no groundbreaking confessions. There were no rose petals or diamond rings involved. It was a regular Friday evening, and we were having hot boat. Vicky's small flat was where they stayed together. The induction cooker bubbled and hummed as steam fogged up the windows. Vicky carefully placed a slice of fatty beef into my dish before gently pushing over the dipping sauce she had created. "Be careful, it's hot," she advised me quietly. I noticed her cheeks flush from the steam as she scooped out prawn paste from the pot. Small beads of sweat gathered on her forehead and her eyes focused in the instant. A piece of my heart felt totally full and steady, nearly wonderful. "Vicky," I set down my chopsticks, my voice muffled by the steam in the air. "Let's get married." The motion of fishing out the prawn paste paused in midair. Vicky looked up, her eyes bright and focused on me through the gloom. Her eyes shined, as if they were covered in water. There was a few seconds silence. The only sound was the bubbling of the hot pot. Then the corners of her mouth slowly curved up. Her smile swelled like waves on a lake, gradually broadening until her eyes and brows were filled with true happiness. "Yes." She nodded firmly, her voice not loud, but full of conviction, as if everything had been resolved. She did not ask why or impose any boundaries. She only responded, "Yes," with warmth that seemed to sink into my soul. The wedding preparations were busy and full of minor details, yet they all exhibited Vicky's delicate touch. She did not drag me to high-end bridal boutiques or jewelry shops. Instead, we wandered through lively homeware markets and charming village retailers. We browsed the big blue shelves in IKEA, and she had a small notebook. Her features appeared soft and concentrated beneath the overhead lights, as she carefully studied the pricing and materials of different dishes and bowls. "How about this bone? China, the glaze is thick, the design is simple, and it's easy on the eyes." She grabbed up a white porcelain bowl and ran her fingertips over its rim. "Whatever you think." I watched her carefully choose things. I felt my heart soften utterly. Jessica used high-quality imported dinnerware. Each piece was an artwork that I was terrified to touch in fear I put fingerprints on it. But Vicky's options were warm and down-to-earth, within reach and pleasant. At a neighborhood tailor's shop that had been open for over 10 years, Vicky chose the cheongsam she wanted to wear for our wedding. It was not a lovely satin fabric, simply a basic light apricot silk with a few sprigs of magnolia embroidered in the same color. The senior tailor, wearing reading glasses, carefully measured her. "Your physique is extremely lovely. This fabric is perfect for you. It's simple and elegant," the tailor answered, smiling. Vicky grinned shyly. She pulled her lips together. When the tailor measured her waist, his hand unintentionally touched her side. Vicky's body tensed slightly before relaxing again. I stood by and observed. I liked the smooth slope of her neck as she bowed her head like a graceful swan. She insisted on making me a suit, too. She rejected down thousands of dollars ready-made clothing and took me to the fabric store to choose textiles. "How about this wool blend? It's solid but soft, and the hue is dignified." Her fingertips brushed the deep blue cloth with a soft familiarity. Finally, we agreed on a modified jonction suit, simple and neat. During the measurement, the silky tape measure wrapped around my shoulders and chest. Vicky stood calmly at my side, gazing me with eyes as smooth as melted honey. The tailor measured my arm length. She suddenly muttered softly, "Master his arm here." She referred to the spot near my shoulder. "Could you widen it by half an inch? He uses a computer a lot and it's tight here, so it might be uncomfortable for him." I halted, shocked. I had not even seen that little feature myself. The tailor was similarly taken aback and then smiled. extremely thoughtful. All right, I'll change it. At that time, sunshine spilled through the fabric store's ancient glass windows gleamed with tiny dust particles, dancing in the light beams. I inspected Vicky's sleek and focused features, and an amazing warmth wrapped around my heart, more intense than the sunlight outside. Jessica has been condemning the little sharp edges for 3 years as not good enough for unqualified. Vicky seems to have diligently placed and cared for these unique marks. Being really cared for by someone feels like this. She welcomes all of you and discreetly provides room for you to stretch and breathe in places you can't see. Chapter 5. The wedding took place in the modest chapel at the community hall. Vicky chose the date. She read through an antique almanac. She described the day as perfect for marriage and settling down. There was no major spectacle. The guest list only contained Monica, a few close neighbors, and to co-workers from my company with whom I was friendly. Vicky mentioned that her parents lived far away and were not in good condition, so she just had her cousin. Those who worked in a nearby city could make it. The chapel was basic yet warmly adorned. Monica few ecstatic aunties had used red silk and bright paper to craft ornamental happy characters and streamers. Vicky had acquired many pots of blossoming azaleas at the flower market, which were vibrant red and festive, to set on the windowsill. The air was filled with the exquisite perfume of lilies and the toasted aroma of sunflower seeds. Vicky donned a light apricot-colored cheong sam. Her hair was beautifully made up with a simple jade hairpin. She wore light makeup, and the gentleness of her eyes was highlighted. This makes her much more fascinating. When she walked out of the lounge and stood at the entrance to the chapel, even from a few meters away, I could hear the thudding of my own heartbeat. Sunlight spilled through the windows, laying dappled light on her. She stood there contentedly, like a painting. Time has kindly touched me. The officiant was a retired teacher from the community, whom Monica had asked on short notice. Reading the opening remarks, he talked heartily in Mandarin with a dialect accent. Vicky and I stood towards the end of the red carpet. Her hand delicately grabbed my arm, her fingertips cool with a barely discernible quiver. I turned my head and spotted a shy flush on her cheeks beneath her lower lashes. "Let's have a warm round of applause for the newlyweds' happiness," murmured the old teacher, his voice clear. Applause came in uneven waves, mixed with the neighbors' warm chuckles and blessings. The chapel was packed with garish but sincere excitement. I squeezed Vicky's palm tightly, feeling the power of her return grasp. The warmth of our palms took away the mild chill. As the officiant was preparing to proclaim the exchange of rings, bang, the massive wooden door of the chapel was immediately ripped open with a massive force. Blinding sunshine rushed in, casting enormous shadows on the figures standing at the foyer with a chilly, unpleasant aura. The chapel fell silent in an instant. All of the laughter and blessings appeared to be paused. Monica dropped her sunflower seeds all over the floor while the neighbors gasped. In the backlight, a tall figure stepped forward, each stride on the red carpet precise and determined. Jessica wore a finely made black suit. Her hair was perfectly brushed, and her attitude was cool and collected. Behind her were two men in black suits wearing earpieces with unpleasant attitudes. Their presence mirrored that of sentinels. Time appeared to freeze. The pleasant floral perfume in the air was replaced by a chilling and virtually foggy environment. Jessica's glare was like a spotlight burning over the room. Finally, we settled on the hands Vicky and I were holding. Her eyes were colder than they had been 3 years ago. When she disappeared, she had an indifferent, scrutinizing stare, almost like assessing products. With a slight, hardly perceptible tone of wounded bitterness, she moved immediately up to us, standing just a step away from Vicky. Her huge aura seems to thin the surrounding air. Vicky swiftly tightened her clutch on my arm. I could feel her body tensing and her complexion losing color. Jessica's look pierced through Vicky's face like an ice pick. Her lips twisted into a chilly smile. "Angelo." Her voice was not loud, but it certainly hit every tense nerve in the room. Cold as metal, your taste in women really hasn't changed in 10 years. How disappointing. She tilted. Hirsch raised her head and used her eyes to signal. One of her bodyguards stepped forward with lightning quickness. His Lorgevicki gasped in anguish as the gloved hand, like an iron claw, squeezed painfully around her delicate wrist. Her body was yanked off balance, and her wrist instantly became bright red with marks. Let go of her. My mind went numb. Blood rushed to my brain. Without thinking, I began to rush towards them. The second bodyguard swiftly moved in front of Jessica like an immovable wall. His steely eyes fixated on me. Jessica disregarded the turbulence happening in front of her. She only leaned in slightly, her icy gaze going closer to Vicky's pale face. It has lost its hue due to pain and stress. Her voice lowered almost to a whisper, but with caustic coldness. Miss Vicky, or should I say, Nightingale, you've been lurking by his side for so long. It must have been taxing. She stopped, savoring the look of horror that suddenly enveloped Vicky's gaze. To bad your wedding gift about the falling star system's core architecture. I'm afraid it won't be delivered after all. Chapter 6, Nightingale. The term struck me like the cold bullets exploding into my eardrums. My blood and thoughts were suddenly frozen. Falling Star was a next-generation AI project. Jessica's digital startup recently launched and astonished the industry. It was recognized as the crown jewel, with security so tight it was a top company secret. I moved my emphasis aggressively to Vicky. Her face was pallid than paper. Her body trembled slightly under the bodyguard's tight grip, and cold sweat formed on her brow. Her eyes, normally kind and caring, now harbored an overwhelming worry. Bewilderment and a sight of dread appeared to have been exposed and had no place to hide. It's not like that, she murmured with trembling lips. Her voice was faint and desperate as she attempted to extract herself from the bodyguard's clutches. Red markings on her wrist. It immediately formed a dark bruise. Angelo, please pay attention to what Jessica has said. Her tone was full of biting sarcasm as she gazed down at her from above, as if she were a predator watching a defenseless insect. Do you want to tell me how you schemed to get close to him? How you utilize his identity as a programmer to gradually gather facts regarding the Falling Star project, including the peripheral parts? How your innocent-looking face conceals so many unsavory jobs? Each word was like a terrible whip striking at my heart. All the wonderful memories, late-night spring noodles, the fixed laptop, the arranged bookcase, the modest advice applied at our fitting was soon ripped apart, revealing the awful truth that could have been hiding beneath. I didn't mean to hurt him. Vicky suddenly looked up, tears pouring down her cheeks. Her eyes wide with horror. And begging as she stared at me with an emotion I had never seen before. Angelo, I truly care about you. Jessica sneered. What's the worth of Nightingale's true intentions? Isn't the rule of your deep web outfit that the objective justifies the means, which includes manipulating your body and emotions as weapons? She raised her hand slightly, and instantly, one of her security walked over and handed her a small, sharp-edged envelope. Jessica pinched the packet between the fingers as if it were filthy. He calmly waved it in front of her. This includes encrypted screenshots of each item of information you've handed up, your deep web login history, as well as your cousin's genuine identity and admission info. Do you want me to read this loudly in front of your true-hearted husband so he can finally see who's lying next to him? The church was deathly silent, and the neighbors watched in shock at the spectacle unfolding before them. Unable to fathom what was going on, Monica closed her mouth, frightened to speak. Only Vicky's subdued breaking cries sounded in the icy air. I stood motionless, my limbs numb, as if I were glued to the red carpet. My mind was a tornado. Jessica's chilly remarks and Vicky's desperate eyes pulled me apart. The foundation of trust shattered in an instant, revealing the profound blackness underneath. I glanced at the obvious bruise on her wrist and her tear-streaked face. My heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand, throbbing to the point of suffocation. Why did my voice sound hoarse and dry like sandpaper grinding against stone. Vicky's weeping ceased for a time, and she lifted her tearful eyes to gaze at me through the murky water in her eyes. Her lips moved briefly before releasing a faint whisper. "Because only by your side I feel like a person." Her words struck me like a mild electric shock, piercing through the fog of wrath and betrayal that had been masking my thoughts. But Jessica's harsh voice swiftly burned out this ephemeral light. "What a touching revelation," she clapped slowly. The sound that echoed in the still chapel was magnificent and out of place, regrettably. It was too late. She turned to face me, her look as keen as a blade. "Angelo, are you seeing it clearly now? Is this the woman you chose? A calculated, dishonest business spy who could pull you into an abyss at any point? Come with me." Her tone conveyed a strong air of entitlement, as if I were still in command. Angelo from 3 years ago, obedient, awkward, and constantly whirling in circles around her coffee machine. Her bodyguards relinquished their grip on Vicky's wrist, but they remained like iron castles behind her. Vicky staggered as she waited for her next command. Either take me away, or deal with this predicament. She almost dropped to the ground, gripping her injured wrist, her tear-filled eyes seizing on mine. Her little Chalan was now tarnished with dust, and her eyes were filled with unending sorrow and misery as she waited for judgment. The artificial flowers at the end of the red carpet resemble a magnolia flower devastated by a storm. The efficient's platform still appeared active, and the guest seats were covered with sunflower seeds and wedding confectionery that glistened with cheap. The lily aroma in the air had been completely overpowered by the smell of gunpowder. I stood between two women, one representing the cold, strong, and unmistakable past and reality. The other represents warmth, deception, and an unknown gap that may lead to eternal agony. The scarlet carpet beneath my feet had never felt so hot, yet so frigid. Chapter 7. Jessica's palm hovered in midair. Her manicured nails, precisely curved and rounded, glittered coldly under the chapel's harsh white lights. The traces of victory, the unshakable assurance on her face, frozen the minute my words dropped, quickly opened wide with an astonished gap. "What did you say?" Her voice was whispered as if pressed between her teeth, filled with a boiling repressed wrath from a deep sense of offense. I didn't look at Jessica, my eyes bypassing her cold shoulder and landing on Vicky. Vicky, who was laying on the floor behind her, was staring back at me, her face covered in tears, bruises, and the same terrible surprise as if she didn't realize what I just said. I took a long breath, emotions growing in my chest like lava poised to explode. Scorching my throat, I leaned down awkwardly, rummaging inside a modest eco-friendly bag that had been kicked to the edge of the red carpet. During the uproar, I took out a sandwich wrapped tightly in plastic wrap. There were a few oil marks on the wrap, and the sandwich was not properly shaped. One corner of the bread was partially crumpled due to being pressed. I picked it up and held it in front of Jessica. And in front of everyone's surprised attention. Because of this, my speech was not loud but clear. She prepared this for me this morning before dawn, with a calmness that made me feel as if I were risking everything, because I worked late yesterday and had stomach difficulties all night. The church was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. All eyes were fixed on the cheap, unpleasant, and slightly unattractive sandwich. Whole wheat bread with Afreet egg with slightly crunchy edges, a few lettuce leaves, and a generous covering of mashed potatoes. No pricey ingredients, no beautiful plating. "You say she's a spy." She lied to me. I peered directly into Jessica's eyes, where my disheveled yet resolute picture was reflected. "It's probable that she has ulterior objectives. For the past 3 years, I've been swirling around you like a top, always scared that everything I did would be incorrect, or that I'd act stupid. You have stomach troubles, so I investigated recipes and learned how to cook all kinds of soups. You'd take a taste, determine it was too salty like dish water, and pour the entire bowl away." Jessica's pupils appeared to shrink, and her jaw stiffened. "I remained up late arranging the project data you wanted. I didn't understand them and went to work the next day with dark bags under my eyes. You said I was so inefficient that I couldn't even organize fundamental data effectively, which impeded your development. My voice began to quiver, not out of fear, but because long-held hatred and wrath had finally found an outlet. I know I'm clumsy. I couldn't use those high-end coffee machines. Couldn't create the 82-degree, couldn't afford the brands you preferred. So I'd bring you a scarf from a street stall instead. You dump it in the storage room without even unwrapping it, saying it didn't fit your standards. Each word seemed like a dull dagger stabbing through the dusty memories, reopening my own scabbed-over scars, those efforts that had previously been disregarded, taken for granted, and stepped on were suddenly exposed for all to see. But then I abruptly pointed to Vicky on the floor, my voice rising sharply with a lump in my throat. She sensed my stomach trouble and quietly proceeded to make millet porridge for me. She remembered that I required space for my arm when constructing clothing and had to loosen it half an inch. She'd see dusty old books on my bookcase and ask if I wanted them. Instead of discarding them as archaic and useless, even the simplest food, such as noodles. Even if she put too much salt, smile and say, "Next time, put less," instead of throwing it away. I gripped the sandwich hard, the rough edge of the plastic wrap ripping into my palm, generating extreme discomfort. "Jessica, you asked me why I chose her." I feigned a smile that was uglier than tears. My vision blurred, but my gaze stayed fastened on her. Because of this horrible burger. Because only she cares about my stomach. Adjacently, she considers me like a human being, not as a tool that may be branded as stupid and useless. My chest swelled forcefully after pronouncing the last words. It seemed like I had used every ounce of my strength. The sandwich was tightly clenched in my fist, and a metallic, sweet sensation surged in my throat. The bread deformed, the mashed potatoes overflowing from the borders, and the chapel grew hushed. Monica buried her face and shook her shoulders while the neighbors exchanged glances with puzzled and complex faces. Jessica's bodyguards, who had always been cold and vicious, appeared to have shifted ever so little. Jessica stood there like a beautiful ice sculpture, her immaculate makeup unable to cover her pale face. She peered at me, her eyes wildly flickering with shock, bewilderment, and rage for being defied, and a sense of new uncomprehending weakness and mistrust. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but all that came out was a cold, mocking laugh. Her glance raced over the deformed sandwich, over Vicky's disheveled figure on the floor, before ultimately landing on my face. Her eyes rose once again to peer down at me. She observed, "Angelo, you're so stupid. Hopelessly so." She turned fast, the sound of her high heels on the red carpet loud and clear, and proceeded towards the entrance without looking back. The two bodyguards immediately followed like the calm clouds of darkness, and the great wooden door opened again. Suddenly the blinding sunlight flooded in, only to be cut short as the door closed once more, leaving the chapel in the loneliness of survival, filled with a discomfort that could hardly be banished. I wavered for a moment before barely managing to stand up. I stared down at the sandwich in my palm, which was now misshapen. The warmth and lingering perfume of the food went through the ripped plastic wrap, persistently reached into my palm. Chapter 8. The sound of sirens grew louder, and closer. Vicky seemed unnervingly serene as she was led away from the small chapel, disturbing the stifling silence within. She did not glance at me again, instead lowering her head and allowed the female officer to cuff her wrists. The dusty apricot cheongsam highlighted her damaged wrists in the icy glare of the chains. Just before departing, her steps faltered slightly, and she whispered, "Sorry, Angelo." Monica and her neighbors gathered around her gentle voice, which was almost like a sigh that soon faded in the air, offering words of comfort. Their eyes overflowed with pity and relief that they had survived the incident. I felt like a puppet. The beautifully designed chapel was now in ruins, and my mind responded mechanically with a blank nothingness, with scattered red paper pieces, shattered wedding candies, and collapsed chairs. It looked like after a magnificent but ridiculous farce. I shut myself in a 50 square meter rental unit for many days. The phone screen flashed on and off as the draperies were tightly pulled, blocking out all outside light and sound, laden with Monica's anxious texts and the company's questions over my vacation. I glanced at the ceiling. I kept repeating the wedding pictures in my head, Jessica's icy glare, and the bodyguard's forceful grip. Vicky's urgent tears and that deformed sandwich I had gripped in my hand. The truth felt like a blunt dagger at Jessica's. Statements were eventually substantiated by a police inquiry. Vicky, or better codenamed Nightingale, belongs to the notorious worldwide commercial espionage agency named Deep Web. Her objective was clear: to leverage my position as Ave. Coincidentally, repaired laptops were used by a peripheral programmer to collect any information on the Falling Star project. The accidentally viewed project document screenshots. My complaints during late-night work could her so-called cousin turned out to be her organization's point of contact. The information Jessica delivered was incontrovertible, and a wave of nausea flowed over me. I hurried into the bathroom. Gagging at the toilet, but nothing came out. The face in the mirror was pale and gaunt, with deep shadows under the eyes. Looking like a wandering soul, the rage of being fooled, shame of being used, and despair of having. My nearly pathetic craving for warmth was totally crushed and knotted, practically pulling me apart. What disturbed me more was that when my rage and disgust reached its zenith, new pictures would unexpectedly pour across my head. Her eyes were shining with brilliance. The gorgeous curve of her cheek when she said half an inch wider, when fitting the coffee machine. That utterly thrilled face when she heard me say, "Let's get married," amidst the steam from the hot pot. From start to finish, I couldn't believe how vibrant, lifelike, and authentic these graphics were. When the police arrived to collect my last statement, the officer in charge was well prepared. An experienced middle-aged man closed the notebook and stared at me with a sorrowful expression. Murmured Angelo, "I understand that this is difficult to accept. Nevertheless, in our area of business, we witness a lot. Some hunters go so far as to become the prey themselves, so thoroughly absorbed in the role that they even delude themselves. It's not impossible." He hesitated slightly, his voice tanged with almost imperceptible nuance. Vicky, or Nightingale, became highly unstable throughout the final stages of the interrogation. She kept saying one word, and I shot up, my heart tightening as if an invisible hand had grasped it. The cop kept my gaze and talked gently. She noted that the bowl of noodles was real, that bowl of noodles was genuine, and those comments seemed like stones dropped into slow water, sending ripples across the frozen lake of my heart, generating a maelstrom of bewilderment and misery, wrath, doubt, grief, and fainting, nearly unnoticeable, a sense of confusion overtaking me once more. Chapter 9. Time is the most incompetent but most effective quack doctor. It cannot eliminate scars, but it may lessen and numb terrible agony, making it pleasant over time. I clipped my hair, shaved my beard, and returned to work. My co-workers avoided bringing up the absurd wedding, but there was a new level of hesitant sympathy in their eyes. Life reverted to its normal rhythm, developing code, addressing errors, getting takeaway, and staring at the silent wall. If Vicky was sentenced to prison for a lengthy amount of time, and I did not attend the trial, Monica learned the news through numerous channels and informed me with a sigh that girl during the trial was quite calm and confessed clearly. When the court asked her if she had anything to add, she stayed silent for it was a long time before she apologized. "I'm sorry, Angelo. That bowl of noodles was genuine." Monica wiped her eyes, wondering what this was all about. The dish of noodles was real. The words echoed in my head like a spell, yet they couldn't eradicate the taint of betrayal. However, they were like a tiny thorn embedded deep in my heart, occasionally inflicting a pain. Jessica never showed up again, but her tech business thrived with the Falling Star. The initiative was a big success. and her name was often cited in business headlines and technological news, basking in magnificence. She and I became two parallel lines never to cross, split by an unfathomable chasm. Despite class and a terrible history, life appeared to be settling down until one stifling July evening. The air was thick and sticky, as if it might be wrung out into water, and black clouds hung low above the city, generating a storm ready to explode. I had just finished working overtime and was dragging my exhausted body out of the office building when the same dull aching in my stomach started again. Probably due to the half-hearted after eating my takeaway dinner, I turned down a familiar alley, expecting to stop by the convenience store I frequented for stomach medicine. Jessica was standing beside a tiny tree on the sidewalk, and I noticed her through the store's sparkling glass windows. There were no bodyguards or showy sports cars nearby, and she was dressed in a well-tailored off-white casual attire. Despite without the sharpness of her regular business armor, she still seemed out of place. She appeared to be waiting for someone. Her side profile was highlighted by the cold white, and her eyes was riveted on the neon lights flashing across the street. The light from the convenience shop appeared faint and lost, so I instantly ignored. Hurt, however, the stinging ache in my stomach became more intense, and I couldn't help but slump over and groan silently. "What's wrong?" A chilly voice sounded from quite close. I looked up in wonder. Jessica had somehow arrived in front of me, her brow furrowed as she looked at my hand gripping my tummy. "It's nothing." I straightened up and said stiffly, trying to get past her stomach ache. She didn't step aside, her keen eyes scrutinizing my pallid face. Her tone was more of a professional confirmation than fear, and I bit my lip. The feeling of being examined was suffocating, exactly as it had been 3 years ago. I was unwilling to answer, just as the unsettling tension hung in the air. Massive showers began to fall in an instant. The rain came down in sheets like a deluge, accompanied by the booming sound of thunder. Pedestrians shrieked and scattered in all directions, and Jessica and I were taken off surprise and immediately soaked to the bone. "Over there," Jessica responded immediately, gripping my wrist with enormous power without saying anything. He drew me to a modest bus shelter that could only accommodate 2 or 3 passengers seeking cover from the storm. Inside the cramped chamber, several more soaking people huddled together, all desperate to escape the storm. I stood close to Jessica, our garments soaking through the icy moisture sticking to our bodies, and we could both feel the same chill, the rain and an unsettling warmth from our contact. The rain flowed down her hair and cheeks, washing away her great makeup, showing a faint fatigue underneath. She moved her head slightly and stared out at the violent storm. Her lips squeezed tightly together, mute. The air was filled exclusively with the sound of rain falling, and the murmurs of cramping anguish in my stomach worsened in the cold and dampness. And I couldn't help but bend over. I could hear others talking about the weather nearby, muttering gently. A square object encased in cellophane was quickly placed into my hand. I looked down, shocked to see a box of basic aluminum magnesium chewable tablets, the most common. I looked up, shocked to see Jessica's face. "Stomach medicine can be acquired at any convenience store." She remained expressionless. Her glance quickly swept over my face before returning to the white blur of rain outside. Her tone was as bland as if she were talking about the weather. "I simply purchased it at the shop, and you can make do with it." I grasped the small package in my hand. The plastic wrapper made a tiny sound when I clutched it with my damp fingertips, and the box still contained the warmth of her hand. The precipitation flowed into my eyes, obscuring my eyesight. I gazed at this image of Jessica, wet by the rain, with some of her armor removed. She appeared curiously foreign. Then I looked at the cheap drug in my palm. My mind felt as if it had just poured all of its feelings at once. She remembered that I had stomach troubles. The realization hit me harder than the drug itself, bringing up emotions I couldn't express. Was it a habit of someone in power, striving to preserve control, or was it a modest, silent attempt to make amends that she hadn't even realized herself? The rain continued unabated, and the air inside the small shelter was thick with humidity and tension. I gently opened the container, retrieved the tablets, and chewed them dry. The slightly sweet bitter taste extended over my mouth. About the wedding day, Jessica suddenly whispered, her voice virtually lost in the storm. She continued to stare out into the rain without looking at me. I've thought about what you said for a long time. My heart skipped a beat, and the chewing paused. You said I treated you like a tool and that you were stupid. The soup you made tasted like dishwater. Her words came slowly, as if she were intentionally selecting them. With a rare and almost puzzled candor, I realized I was used to valuing efficiency. I'm so used to measuring everything by results. Maybe the soup you made wasn't to my taste, but I shouldn't have said that. She stopped, as if the following words were even more difficult to speak. The rain hammered ferociously against the roof of the bus shelter. As for Vicky, she finally turned her face towards me. Like the sound of small drum beats, rain had taken away their clarity, and they now appeared dark and complex. The methods used to influence members of Deep Web are cruel, and her desire to be close to you is genuine. The speaker's brow creased as she searched for the perfect words to deliver the crucial information. I opened my eyes, staring at her in amazement as I comprehended what she had put out at the end. Jessica's voice was faint, yet it sounded like a thunderclap in my ears. In a very devious way, she fooled her boss, resulting in a severe failure in a key operation against Falling Star due to significant losses. She was entirely abandoned by the organization and exposed. So soon, I held the damn pillbox hard. The sound of rain seemed to drift away in that moment, the plastic edges ripping into my palm, causing a stinging ache. Vicky's final faltering words he never intended to enter him, and her statement throughout the trial that the bowl of noodles was real, was like to blinding lights. She betrayed her own organization in the most terrible way. For my heart felt like it was being crushed by an invisible hand aching. Why are you telling me this? My voice sounded dry and rough. Jessica moved her gaze back to the white world beyond, her side profile hidden by the rain's reflection. After a long interval that made me believe she wouldn't answer, she ultimately murmured gently. Her remarks was nearly drowned out by the torrential rain, perhaps because I also want to know how real a meal of noodles can genuinely be. Chapter 10. 5 years is enough to alter a lot. My employment shifted from being a programmer at a typical from a software business to becoming a prominent technical member at a small but relaxing startup. I jumped out of the prior community laden with memories and moved into a new suburb, closer to the workplace with a pleasant vibe. Life was still busy, but without some of the hidden limitations. The earlier stomach troubles scarcely affected me anymore. The name Vicky, along with that insane wedding. I carefully stored everything away in the depths of my thoughts, only on quiet nights while going by a street cellar that smells of food. A little dull ache will travel over my chest. Monica periodically brought up the girl, sighing a few words, and immediately changed that Jessica will excitedly introduce me to probable new mates, which I will politely dismiss with a grin. She remained the CEO at the apex of the tech industry, shining brightly. Her news continued to dominate the headlines, though news about her personal life had practically evaporated. We were like the planets in separate orbits, with no intersection. That summer storm, the cheap stomach medication, and her odd words relating the bowl of noodles had become a fuzzy, moist fragment of recollection. It was another deep autumn, and the sky was as blue as if it had been scoured clean. Our company had taken on a new project, and after months of working overtime, the sun gave the appropriate amount of warmth. When it was eventually delivered successfully. This morning, the tightness in my chest subsided and exhaustion washed over me like a tidal wave. I declined my colleague's invitation to supper, wanting nothing more than to go home and sink into bed. As I moved out of the office building's rotating door, the warm afternoon light hit me squarely, making it difficult to keep my eyes open. I reflexively grimaced, extending my hand to hide my eyes from the light and shadows. As my eyesight deteriorated, a deep blue long-handled umbrella emerged above my head, stable and silent. I froze and turned my head, amazed by the right amount of shadow that masked the blinding sunlight. The umbrella was slightly lifted, and the individual below it was wearing a soft off-white turtleneck sweater. Her long hair was carelessly put back, a few strands spilling at the corners of her face. Her features were smaller today. The smooth roundness had been replaced by sharper qualities, although it still carried a sense of tranquility. The sunshine poured through the meager sycamore branches, creating mottled shadows on her. She remained there motionless, her gaze as benign as a calm autumn afternoon lake, matching my shocked face. Time seems to freeze in that instant. The boisterous crowd in the building, the rush of the street traffic. All went away like waves retreating. The world was so peaceful that the rustling sound of the wind swept through the leaves, and our breathing stayed steady and clear. She glanced at me. The corners of her mouth curled into a small smile, soft but like a stone dropped in the middle of a lake. It prompted ripples of warmth to travel to the darkest corners of her eyes. Angela's voice was subdued. With a huskiness born of time apart, but it stroked over my heart like a feather, instantly awakening dormant recollections and warmth. Long time no see.